So by now, most of you have finished Spider-Man PS4 and probably the DLC chapters as well. If not, this video will be full of spoilers, so come back after you've beaten the game. What I want to talk about primarily today is the post-credit scene after the main story where we see Norman visit Harry in that secret room, as well as some sequel predictions based on this scene. So, in this end scene, we see Harry who appears to be in a tank with the symbiote instead of in Europe like everyone thinks. The main question this raises is whether or not Harry will become Venom in the sequel. I think there are clues in this scene that could suggest yes or no, so I'll mention these clues as well as if I overall think Harry will become Venom. So let's start with why Harry won't be Venom. The first point is a bit subjective, so tell me if you disagree, but to me, the symbiote doesn't appear to have bonded with Harry in this tank. We can see certain points where the symbiote is making contact with Harry, like his chest, legs, and arms, but overall, the symbiote is spread out all around the tank. Also, if the symbiote had bonded to Harry, it would have healed him by now. We've seen the symbiote's healing power most recently in the Venom movie, and we know that the symbiote is very picky regarding its host body. We can assume that Norman has had the symbiote for some time and has been running experiments without success. I think that if the symbiote would have bonded with Harry, there wouldn't even need to be the Devil's Breath cure throughout the whole first game. I also don't think Norman would still be this desperate for a cure. As for the reasons why Harry will be Venom, I don't have many big points to discuss besides the fact that Harry is in the tank with the symbiote. Although the main moment that I do want to focus on is when the symbiote reaches out towards Norman's hand when he places it on the glass. This could be a sign of Harry having control of the symbiote and reaching out lovingly towards Norman like we see in plenty of prison movies. This by itself could be showing Harry and Venom merging as one. However, I want to point out a counter idea to this. In this moment, Harry could only have temporary control of the symbiote. We know the symbiote will often take on a temporary host to survive until it can find a more perfect, permanent host. This could be what we see here with Harry. Alternatively, the symbiote could even be reaching out to Norman to try to take him as a new potential host. To sum up all of these points, I don't think there is one concrete way to look at this post-credit scene. My first viewing, I thought that Harry would be Venom, but after watching it a couple more times, I'm starting to think otherwise. Also, just in case anyone is wondering, I don't believe Harry has ever been Venom in the comics. I'm not using that as evidence since I know this game can easily take some liberties for the story, but I thought it was worth mentioning. So basically, my personal thought is that Harry won't be Venom, or at least not the true Venom in the sequel. My theory is that the symbiote will be with Harry until it breaks free and either finds Spider-Man or Eddie Brock, but more on that later. The next character I want to focus on is Norman, and whether or not he will become the Green Goblin in the sequel. I'll cut to the chase on this one and say that I think he will. The reasons for this are more straightforward. While playing as Mary Jane in the first game, you can come across a few interesting items. The first is that sweet prototype helmet you can use to scan the hidden wall, along with schematics for a combat mask. This could easily become the Goblin helmet he'll use, or at least a more updated version. Once you get into the secret room, you can also find his trademark pumpkin bombs. They don't look like pumpkins, but they do look more modern and similar to the ones seen in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man film. There's also a symbol in the top left section of the HUD when you put on the proto-helmet. It's tough to read, but it looks like it says Glider Tech Sync with a picture of a glider. It's possible that the glider is hinted at too in the subway station as the medical evacuation drone. I think the hints towards Green Goblin are very blatant and much more objective than the ones that I went over for Venom. Now, how could Norman end up becoming Green Goblin? My guess is that it will be similar to the origin to the one in the Raimi Spider-Man movie, where Norman tests an unproven formula on himself out of desperation. The difference here is that Norman could feel that the time is running out to save Harry, and he uses the unproven serum on himself, turning himself crazy and super strong in the process. We saw all the spider experiments in the secret room as well, so this could be a source of some of those powers. Since I don't want this video to be too short, I thought I would spend some time going over my theories on how this could all play out in the next game. These are just some of my ideas, so none of this is proven at all. But starting off, I think Spider-Man is going to get the symbiote at some point in the game. I know this feels pretty obvious, since the black suit was arguably the most requested suit in the first game. Its absence means Insomniac are saving it for a more important story moment in the sequel. My thought is that the symbiote will breach Oscorp in search of a new host. The symbiote finds Spider-Man and latches onto him. During this time, Harry is dying, and Norman desperately uses a serum on himself. The serum turns him into the Green Goblin. Norman sees Spider-Man with the symbiote and notices that they have successfully bonded. Norman will want the symbiote back to experiment on it for Harry, and in an attempt to reclaim the symbiote, this leads to fights between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. Okay, here's where I get a little more off the rails and suggest that Green Goblin dies during one of these fights. I'm not suggesting that Peter kills him, but Peter will be more aggressive than usual and Goblin will accidentally die at some point. After this, Peter hates how dark the suit has made him, and we get the church bell sequence where Peter removes the suit and it finds Eddie Brock, who I think will end up as the actual Venom. This will lead to Venom becoming the new main villain. Meanwhile, Harry is saved either using the Goblin formula or a future legitimate serum. After learning of his father's death against Spider-Man, he takes up the Goblin mantle, as we have seen in the movies and comics. So the reason I think Norman will die is because I think Harry will take up the mantle, and I don't think Insomniac will have two goblins coexist at the same time. Also, I think the tragedy of having Peter fight his best friend is always interesting. Of course, none of these ideas could happen at all, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I'm sure Insomniac have a great story in mind for the sequel regardless. My reason for making this video is that I haven't seen this post-credit scene or sequel discussed much lately, so I thought I would just talk about it a little bit more, even though I know a sequel hasn't been officially announced. But we know it's coming, and regardless, this game is incredible and I love discussing it. So let me know how you think things will play out and whether or not you think I'm totally off base. I'm sure there will be plenty more to discuss in the coming years before the sequel comes out. Until then, thanks for watching, and if you're into podcasts about Marvel movies, I also have a podcast called The Weekly Bugle, which is in the description below. But yeah, see you next time, everyone.